These are the representatives who recently signed the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. China, France, Germany, the European Union, Iran, Russia, the UK, and the US. They are the P5+1, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. Lately, it has been drumming up a lot of controversy between the two opposing sides, namely former US President Barack Obama supporting the Iran nuclear deal, and current US President Donald Trump vehemently opposing it.
A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
This was a horrible disaster.
It's a disaster.
Deal that should have never, ever been made.
That permanently prohibits Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
Even if Iran fully complies, the regime can still be on the verge of a nuclear breakout in just a short period of time.
It contains the most comprehensive inspection and verification regime. As was true in previous treaties, it does not resolve all problems. It certainly doesn't resolve all our problems with Iran.
The Iranian-backed terrorist group Hezbollah twice bombed our embassy in Lebanon. Iranian-supported bombing killed 241 Americans, bombing, killing 224 people, and wounding more than 4,000.
But what is the Iran nuclear deal? To find out, we need to go back to the year 1953 to see how it all started.
If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing that I'd like to do is to save every day till
Stop! It's 1953. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was just recently overthrown in a coup by the US and the UK to install a pro-Western leader in Iran. However, what the Americans didn't anticipate was that this would create a deep-rooted anti-American sentiment throughout Iran. Post-coup, the US would forge a close alliance with Iran, where the US would assist Iran in creating its nuclear weapons program in 1957. Despite Soviet attempts to overthrow the Shah, he remained in power until the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the culmination of years of dissident against the Shah and the US. On November 4th, 1979, the revolutionary students took control of the American embassy in Tehran, taking hostage over 52 Americans for 444 days.
We continue to face a grave situation in Iran, where our embassy has been seized and more than 60 American citizens continue to be held as hostages in an attempt to force unacceptable demands on our country. We're using every available channel to protect the safety of the hostages and to secure their release.
The US in response froze approximately $12 billion in Iranian assets and implemented sanctions that are still effective to this day. On December 1st of 2016, the ISA, which is the Iran Sanctions Act, was extended for another 10 years. On January 19th, 1984, during the Iran and Iraq War, the US officially added Iran to the list of state sponsors of terrorism, still one of the most contentious issues in US-Iranian relations to this day.
US-Iranian relations have only worsened over the decades, adding to a persistent distrust and animosity between them and several others. In 2003, the US claimed that Iran had developed a nuclear program, which Iran stated was for the sole purpose of generating electricity. It was later proven that Iran had possession of enough uranium for multiple atomic bombs, and that action by the Security Council was necessary. The UN, US, and EU imposed sanctions on Iran as a response, devastating their economy for years. Iran would later agree to enter into the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with the United Nations, specifically the P5+1. The deal forced Iran to deplete 98% of its uranium stockpile and allow inspectors from the IAEA to monitor Iran's nuclear development to ensure that they are abiding by all agreements stated in the deal. This was in exchange for removing sanctions on Iranian oil exports and allowing them access to over $100 billion in frozen assets overseas. However, President Trump abandoned the deal and reinstated sanctions, leading to a major downturn in the short-lived thriving economy in Iran. The value of the Iranian rial reached record lows and its inflation rate quadrupled. The rest of the P5+1 was not on board with this plan. However, the IAEA had stated that Iran had already begun producing larger quantities of enriched uranium. If it were to be confirmed that there were any violations of the agreement, UN sanctions would be raised again.
So why did Trump pull the US out of the deal? Trump believes the Iran nuclear deal had greater potential to rectify various other concerns other than nuclear weapons development. The first of these problems being the ethical violations committed by the Iranian government. The Iranian regime supports terrorism and exports violence, bloodshed, and chaos across the Middle East. That is why we must put an end to Iran's continued aggression and nuclear ambitions. They have not lived up to the spirit of their agreement, he said in October 2017. On January 19, 1984, during the Iran and Iraq War, the US officially added Iran to the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Since then, Iran has killed thousands of Americans. According to the 9/11 Commission, in late 1991 and 1992, discussions in Sudan between al-Qaeda and Iranian operatives led to an informal agreement to cooperate in providing support, even if only training, for actions carried out primarily against Israel and the United States. Not long afterward, senior al-Qaeda operatives and trainees traveled to Iran to receive training in explosives. In 1995, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard held a conference with worldwide organizations accused of engaging in terrorism, including the Japanese Red Army, the Armenian Secret Army, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the Iraqi Dawa Party, the Islamic Front of the Liberation of Bahrain, and Hezbollah in Beirut, for the sole purpose of providing training to these organizations, supposedly to help in the destabilization of the Gulf states and to aid assistance to militants in these countries to replace the existing governments with Iran-like regimes. Iran has detained American citizens under dubious claims of being American spies, such as Shi Wei Wang, an American student studying at Princeton University, studying the Chafang dynasty in Tehran. For nearly 40 years, Iran has used detentions and hostage-taking as a tool of state policy, a practice that continues to this day with the recent sentencing of Shi Wei Wang to 10 years in prison, the White House said in July. President Trump has also had an issue with time limits in the Iran nuclear deal. According to the Washington Post, the US president also doesn't want the restrictions set out in this deal, such as the one on uranium enrichment and the use of centrifuges, to have end dates. According to the Iran nuclear deal, based on its long-term plan for 15 years, Iran will carry out its uranium enrichment-related activities, including safeguarded R&D exclusively in the Natanz enrichment facility, keep its level of uranium enrichment at up to 3.67%, and at Fordow, refrain from any uranium enrichment and uranium enrichment R&D, and from keeping any nuclear material.
Since the United States has already withdrawn from the deal, the United States has three options going forward: to re-enter into the deal and abide by its terms, to stay out of the deal permanently and deal with any repercussions that may follow, or renegotiate the deal, having the rest of the P5+1 unanimously in agreement to do so. Undoubtedly, the best of the three options would be to renegotiate the deal. It would act as an opportunity to resolve various issues with Iran, such as the funding of terrorist organizations, as well as offer a less finite solution to the development of Iran's nuclear development program. To do so, despite being the best of the available options, it is also the most difficult. The United States will have to plead with the rest of the P5+1 to raise their sanctions on the grounds that Iran is already on track to violate the terms of the JCPOA, as well as the fact that there is an opportunity to accomplish more with this deal than what was previously negotiated. If the members of the UN comply, then the P5+1 will appeal to Iran for renegotiation under the threat of raising sanctions, effectively devastating the Iranian economy completely. In order to address President Trump's concerns, there are a few essential components needed in the New Deal. Here is a list of the key requirements for the New Deal. Number 1, the deal must be renewed every 20 years with no time limit aside from that. Number 2, the IAEA can inspect anytime they want, however many times they want. Number 3, Iran must stop funding any and all terrorist groups, such as Hezbollah. Number 4, all Americans detained in Iran will be extradited to the US and tried. All sanctions will remain in effect until there is evidence that all terms and conditions are met by Iran. And so, in conclusion, the Iran nuclear...
But what if the P5+1 doesn't want to renegotiate? Well then, we send a CIA operative to infiltrate Iran and put fake evidence that Iran violated the nuclear deal by having enriched uranium. Then, the P5+1 will be they'll be forced to bring Iran back to the renegotiating table so we can get a new green...